Hey friends, we're right in the middle of Joshua. Man, Joshua happened fast. Feels like we started We started late last week, um, Friday, and man, tomorrow we're done with Joshua. So I guess less than a week is enough time. Joshua, it's interesting right here in this middle is actually a little bit harder going than even some of like the Leviticus and Numbers kind of stuff that tends to slow us down quite a bit. It's there's a lot of detail here maybe that is kind of, hard to really get engaged with deeply along the way here. But it's important in that, there's been so much ever since Abraham, really, and the promises for a land, a home, and the exodus from Egypt. We've seen these big themes again and again in the wilderness. It's like this is what they've been waiting for. This is what we've been waiting for in the story, and now it's happening where they were afraid to enter in. They were afraid of the enemies, and now it's going. Things are working out according to plan. Not so much for the people here in the land, but for Israel, for God's people, the 12 tribes of Jacob. Things are going mostly pretty well. And for us, like, we might not care as much about like who gets to go where, who gets what land. But I'll tell you what, if you were part of this group, you would be very, very interested in, where do I get to live? Where's my homeland for future generations going to be? Are we going to get, where's our place to live? Where's our allotment, if you will, to use that kind of weird word. And so this is it. This is their, as they're taking over the land, they are finding out where their homes are going to be. And so there's this, the defeat of these kings, and then the taking of the land. I want to talk, and I don't think this will be a long video today, even though it's a huge portion of scripture, because I'm not trying to do any kind of detail here. I want to talk about Caleb, right? Because Caleb, in his story in chapter 14, so Joshua chapter 14, verse 6 and following, remember, we have Caleb, Joshua. Of course, Joshua's the main kind of character besides God of the story here in the book named after him. But Caleb, the two of them were the two spies that were said, we can do it. And guess what? They did do it. Well, God did it, but, with them, etc. So this is a cool moment along the way. I think if they're making a movie about Joshua, this would be a significant moment, I think. Joshua chapter 14, verse 6. Now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, said to him. By the way, and I didn't really realize this book that I'm still reading, it's been very interesting, good so far, but there's still more on Joshua to read. It's called Flood and Fury, Old Testament Violence in the Shalom, which means peace of God. Matthew Lynch is the author. So it's a good book. He doesn't skirt around the hard realities going on here in the book of Joshua, but also points our attention to some things that we might easily miss. Caleb is not a pure-blooded Israelite. He's actually worked in partially from one of the descendants of Esau, I think, which is really interesting. There's all these things throughout the story. We saw like with Tamar, we'll see with Ruth, with others, Rahab becomes part of the people, that it's not just like there's pure Israelites and then there's everybody else. People are included and again, how often I say in the foreigner, can't get that out. Or I think the KJV has alien, which alien kind of has a different connotation for us, right? But not an obviously core part of the group. There's other people that are included because they want to worship God. They want to be a part of that. And so this is not like a pure blood ethnicity thing. It's a people a worshiping of Yahweh, a worshiping of God, the true Lord people, right? So, okay. Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea about you and me." So Joshua and Caleb are having a moment. Nostalgia, remembering back. Verse 7, I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions. I like that. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. All right, we can turn back to Numbers to remember this. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. And that's what God is looking for, wholehearted. Not necessarily people who never sin, because there's a whole, a whole built-in system, Leviticus, right, for dealing with people's sins, intentional or otherwise, hopefully unintentional. But the Day of Atonement gives the clean slate so far. But it's about a people who want to please God, right? David will later be a man after God's own heart. He has issues too, but ultimately his trajectory, his home base, his default is to want to honor God with his life, wholeheartedness. Caleb had that. Joshua as well, right? So verse 9, so on the day that Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance, and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. I talked yesterday about kind of group solidarity. So Caleb did not do a thing wrong in the exploration and the coming back, and he advocated for it, but he still wandered with them for those 40 years, and he says 45 years. So I guess it would make sense that we're talking about 5 years into potentially, right? I mean, I didn't research that, but I'm just sort of thinking through it. 5 years that maybe has gone on here of the entering into the land and the battles and stuff. Like, this is not just like in a second. There's time that's elapsed. There's other things along the narrative, I don't remember exactly where, that make mention about the long time that these things are going on here. So there's so many things. This would be a great sermon topic. There's so many applications that can be moved out of, drawn from this. But 45 years from that promise, right, that land that you've not set foot on for 40 years, not because of you, but because of the people that you're a part of and their unfaithfulness. But 45 years later, God is faithful, right? And I've said this before along this journey already. We really, I believe, need to reset ourselves. We talk about being patient or impatient. 45 years for a promise. Well, think about this. I mentioned this already as well at other times. It's been a little while. Abraham, he personally doesn't even see the result of God's promises to him, but it's his descendants. And that means something. That's not like a throwaway. We really need to think beyond ourselves, beyond even our own lives, to the big picture of God's purposes, and also within the scope of our lives. Like, we want it yesterday. Our patience is even for the best of us. So I mean, that's something worth reflecting on. 45 years later, God is not unfaithful. God is just not on our timeline. So I think that's just something worth reflecting on there with that. So I'm in end of verse 10. So here I am today, 85 years old. And this just keeps going with this guy. Look at this. Look at his testimony. Verse 11. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. Now, whether that's true or not, that's how he felt. He had that vigor still in himself. I am just as vigorous to go out and do battle now as I was then. Now give me this hill country that the Lord has promised me that day. You yourselves heard that the Anakites um, were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out, just as he said, God. Remember, these Anakites were like the giant warrior dudes of the day. When they came back from spying the land in Numbers, they said, we even saw the Anakites. Like, we can't go in there. Like, these guys are like, think about like Goliath kind of guys, in their um, intimidation factor. And they're still there. But Caleb says, you know what? I'm still ready to fight these guys that 45 rather years ago, God said that you can do it. So why is Caleb, I want to say blameless. I'm not sure if that's the word he's used of, but wholehearted, like Abraham, because he believes God. He trusts God. It's not that he necessarily, he feels vigorous, but it's not necessarily that, I can do it. But if God said it, then I'm going to believe it. Like with Abraham, right? Abraham believed God, and God credited to him as righteousness. That's what God wanted. That's what God wanted back in the garden. To the first, man and woman, Adam and Eve. Trust me, this tree is not for you. That's what he wanted. Trust. That's what he always wants us to trust him. Faith. That's the core of the Christian life, the spiritual life. I think, right? That's the response to the good news, to the gospel, to God's provision for us, is to trust him. We've seen him be faithful. Now trust him. That's the invitation here. So, verse 13. Then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So he gets his own town. Yeah. So Hebron has belonged to Caleb, son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. And then the land had rest from war. Let me just, I just hope you guys are like embracing this and thinking about it, like about our, eulogy type virtues. What is it that we're wanting our life to be characterized by? And man, this is it. This is the well done, good and faithful servant. This is at the end of our lives, will people look back on how we've lived and said, again, it's not about perfection, but her desire was to serve the Lord wholeheartedly, to love others the way that that God has loved us. Man, it's you're not going to make any headlines with that, but if the world was filled with people like that, be some good stuff. So, more of the allotments after that, right? Then we're told actually later in chapter 15 a little teeny bit more about Caleb, right? Chapter 15, verse 13, in accordance with the Lord's command to him, Joshua gave Caleb, son of Jephunneh, a portion in Judah. So within Judah, right? Kiriath Arabah, that is Hebron. In that area, you can see, still today. From Hebron, Caleb drove out 3 Anakites, the sons of Anak. From there, he marched against the people. So he's doing what he said he was going to do, right? And he pledges his daughter in marriage to whoever captures this one thing. So we're living in a different world here, okay? So arranged marriage is sometimes the name of the game. She's probably saying, wait a minute, what about what I want? Well, welcome to the ancient world. Here's an interesting just note along the way. Chapter 15, verse 63, Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. To this day, whenever that day is, guys, it'd be fascinating to go through and track all the to this day things and try to. I know people have done that. I've not. What and surmise when that may have been. In any case, to this day, Jebusites live there with the people of Judah. So one of the things, how long am I? Oh, 15 minutes. That's not too bad. One of the things that the author of this book does, Matt Lynch, Flood and Fury, is talk about both the majority report in Joshua and the minority report. So the majority report is complete success. We get rid of everybody. All the enemies are done away with, and that's that's the bulk of the kind of focus of Joshua. But there's times and places where they weren't successful, and then we see times and places where there's still some people around that we thought we'd get rid of. And so there's just kind of this major theme that I think what the book of Joshua wants to communicate is that by and large, this was a successful endeavor. What God promised happened, right? And it did. But that's not to say that there's not this minority report. So like, why couldn't they get rid of the Jebusites from Jerusalem? It doesn't say exactly. It just says they couldn't do it. So why couldn't they do it if they could do that? Some stuff to wrestle with here, and that's not. I don't think it's a problem. It just kind of rounds out the story some more. That no, Judd, this was not one day's reading. I'm playing catch up because you know my problems. So actually, I'll tell you what, Judd Spencer, my problem was I went down to Virginia to help a brother out, and now I'm trying to catch up on some stuff here today. But I love this Caleb story. But yeah, I mean, this thing about this is a successful endeavor. And yet there's some kind of holdouts. So this is really interesting. I'm not going to go into detail about Jerusalem, but I think what's going on here is that there's two kind of main hills to the kind of core of Jerusalem, and one the city of David, the other Mount Zion. It's called today not the Temple Mount, but Mount Zion. And I think the Jebusites hung on to that. But we'll get further in the story. We'll see how David kind of does business with some more of the Jebusites. But at that point, they weren't able to get rid of them, and they're living there at the same time. So that's kind of the deal there. More division of the land, and if you want to know why the people were where, this is the information that you need for that. In chapter 20, we have the cities of refuge. This should be familiar territory by now. We've seen a lot of discussion already in the Torah about the cities of refuge. And this was, remember, without a system, without, there's no Supreme Court and whole, advanced people dedicated fully to legal system. There's no police force, but etc. And so for people who, I think what we sometimes call like manslaughter or I don't know what the exact words are, but when somebody dies, you didn't mean to do it. There's a place you can go to kind of get a fair hearing. The cities of refuge are that. We saw already that there was, I think, 3 of them on the east bank of the Jordan, which is the country of Jordan today. Remember, they were there as well too. We saw that in the story. And then on the west side, there's these cities of refuge. So we heard about them. God said, make these cities. Now they're saying, here's where they are. And a reminder, here's how they work in that situation. And so we can see more about that there. We've talked about that some already. And then the 21, the Levites, remember, they don't have their own kind of tribal block of land, but they have towns in different places where they will live there as well. So let me just conclude with the end of chapter 21. Tomorrow we will wrap up the whole book of Joshua with the last couple of chapters, which are worth spending some time focusing on a little bit more of the last couple chapters of Joshua. The end of chapter 21, verse 43, ends this way. So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to their ancestors, and they took possession of it and settled there. So again, I talked about the majority report, minority report. But God gave them all the land, hooray. Well, except for some of the Jebusites were still there, and except for the Philistines are still there. So there's, on the whole, win, but there's also some complexity to that. Verse 44, the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their ancestors. Right? So the idea here is that you don't want to be a people that's constantly on edge, constantly at war. You want to rest. You want to be at peace. You want to farm the land and have your family and do those things, enjoy the simple things of life. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hands. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled. Again, I think that's main point stuff of Joshua. God's promise, again, way back to Genesis 12, Abraham, a lot of time later, fulfilled. With Caleb in the midst of the wilderness, 45 years later, right? God will fulfill God's promises. Big picture stuff, very important, applicable. Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Feel free to leave comments, thoughts, questions, suggestions, disappointments, any of that. I'll see you later.